You're listening to the Listen Up Show, Startup Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Mitchell Chadro, your host. Today on this show, 024. Today, we're here with Zephan Blaxberg. Hey, trusted friends, Mitchell here. What will we discuss on today's show? Lessons learned, which are actually jam-packed. Zephan tells us what every happy person has in common, why people take risks, and the reasons you should rewrite your story starting today. Listen up, trusted friends. It's your business, it's your family, it's your life. Now let's get started. Zephan Blaxberg is the author of Life Rescripted, and it's available on Amazon. He's the host of the Year of Purpose podcast, also available on iTunes. Zephan says over the past 2.5 years, he's been travel hacking his way around the country, couch surfing in strangers' homes and redesigning his story, and to build a highly successful business so that he can turn his dream life into a reality. He also says that travel and exploring new places, he says, is only one of the ways that you can live on purpose. He works with amazing coaching clients who love what they're creating in the world. Please sign up to my email list for the latest special offers exclusive for our Listen Up Show Startup Entrepreneur Podcast audience at mitchellchadro.com/sign up. I have been providing business advice, resources, and help to entrepreneurs for over 20 years, and I'm looking forward to helping all of you. Sign up for my email list, again, at mitchellchadro.com/sign up. I will provide you with full transcript for each interview, my ebook, 30 Tools to Start Up, the Startup Checklist, and many other education and training materials, all back at mitchellchadro.com/sign up. Now enjoy the show. Zephan started from scratch and made $15,000 in his first 6 months after quitting his job, and close to $60,000 with a little bit of elbow grease and patience with less than 2 years later. He was able to hack over 25 free flights around the country and still run his business from the road, and in fact, he booked just as much work on the road as he did from home. Zephan has created a free course called Find Your Purpose in 8 Days. The next lesson, a unique tactic that entrepreneurs use to generate millions in revenue. He tells us the juicy inside secrets of lifestyle design, a single tool that will change the way you approach life on all those tough decisions, and he actually adopted it from Elon Musk as it works wonders for every aspect of your life and how you can apply this single tool to your own. Sponsors for today's show, our startup round. For all your hosting needs, head on over to mitchellchadro.com/hosting, mitchellchadro.com/hosting for all your web hosting needs. Who do you use to host this website? Now, on to the show. Zephan's full show and all the links right there at mitchellchadro.com/show024. Okay, Zephan, we are all ready to listen up. So what one thing contributes most to your success?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And again, thank you so much for having me here today. I think that one of the biggest things that contributes to my success is really coming from the mindset standpoint of, where is your head at? Is your head really in the game? And this actually goes back to one of the principles that I talked about in my book, which was all about how are you showing up? So if you imagine, your life and your work and everything that you're doing as a movie, are you showing up during the previews where you might get a hint as to what's to come in the future? Or are you showing up late where you're kind of, stepping over people's feet, trying to find a good seat, and end up ultimately with the chair that has the gum beneath your feet? So I think it's really a matter of, how are you showing up, not physically, but actually in your mind, and what are you doing to sustain that throughout, your morning, your day, and of course your week.
You talk so much in your book as I took a look and just in all your articles about rewriting your story and rescripting your story as a movie. So tell us a little bit about your own personal story. I mean, tell us about your background and how it actually ties in with how you're actually helping people today.
Yeah, so my story started, a couple years outside of college. I felt that I was kind of handed down this script of, you grow up, you get good grades, you go to college, get a degree, get a job, save up some money, maybe buy a house and start growing a family. And that's great. I think that's totally fine. But I think it's relatively mediocre to think that you would work in the same position for the next 30 or 40 years of the rest of your life, only to do these things which result in death. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have a certain finite amount of time here on the earth. And, I think that if you're going to make decisions based around what you're going to do for a living, what you're going to do with your free time and with your life and your family and your friends, it should really be up to you. It shouldn't be based off of this idea of, this handed down script that, your parents lived. They were in a different time and things worked a little bit differently. So I think it's really just a matter of looking at it in your own way and really taking your own story and your own path.
Things keep changing, whether it be in one's personal life or business life. And I just recall getting an email actually from you not too long ago. And so with that, obviously, sometimes change is good and you got to be nimble and you got to be flexible and you got to sort of go with the changing times. So certainly we're going to talk a little bit about what's next for you as I continue to ask you more questions. But so now after all of what you've gone through with the business startup and you're several years in, obviously, tell us what is your mission and your vision for the company? Because obviously it's changed and it will continue to change as you go forward.
Yeah, so I'll expand just a little bit on the timeline of just, where things are at and where they've been over the last few years. So, I got out of college at the end of 2010. Picked up a job and ultimately thought, I'm just following the story of I'm supposed to get a job and make money and do what everyone else does. And I did that for about a year and a half until the company was sold. I lost the position. They didn't take anybody with them and they moved the company to a totally different state. And so, at that time I was kind of in this mode of thinking, I need to have a stable job. I need to have a job and do the same thing for the next, however long. And started to freelance out of necessity just because the job market wasn't so great. Ultimately worked for the Apple Store for about another year and a half. And then in May of 2013, I left my job there to start a video production company. Just really quick to fast forward, about a year and a half to 2 years into the company, I had been really just grinding away at it and working myself into the ground. And so I left to do the travel hacking, which you mentioned, and I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. And really my mission there was to just kind of figure out where I am, like where is my starting point and who am I when you peel away the layers of the onion, so to speak, to find out, when I take away my securities, my safeties, everything that I was used to or everything that I knew to be true, who is that person that remains? And that was a big part of where the travel came in and why I was inspired to create the podcast and write the book was that I had started to really figure out that my mission was really to self-develop, to become the best person that I could be, to learn as many things as I could, to meet people from all over the world and continue to travel and do the things that I loved. And, to this day, that's certainly a big part of the mission, but I think things have changed over time because I started the podcast in January of 2015. Here we are, it's almost the end of 2016. And so we've been almost 2 years into the episodes, nearly 150 people interviewed. And things have changed slightly. So, published the book, published and illustrated 3 adult coloring books, and accomplished quite a lot and learned so much from so many people. But I think for right now, the big focus, or at least the mission, has been to really get my financials in alignment with what I want to do for work and how I want to live my life. I spent the last summer traveling internationally and realized that was such an important part of who I want to be, and really having that flexibility. So the mission now has been really just getting much more aligned between my business and between, the lifestyle that I want to live. And part of that means we're going to be finishing off the podcast that we had started, a little less than 2 years ago, the right way. We've interviewed, tons of people, and we've got a really special surprise episode coming out for episode 150, which should be in the middle of November. But the real mission is, getting back to the roots, becoming more simple, possibly removing some material items because I've just, accrued so many things over the past couple of years. And alignment is the big keyword there.
So in terms of the alignment, I know that after episode 150, as I had read, that, you're going to end the podcast. And so that's why I alluded to the fact that there's going to be many changes in your own personal and business life going forward. And I certainly want to unpack all of that because I think, there's probably a lot of takeaways that you can provide the audience in terms of do's and don'ts and things that they can do, as their own startups and as entrepreneurs. So throughout these years of doing all that you've been up to, what are some of the reoccurring themes that you've actually been experiencing, not only as an aspiring entrepreneur, but maybe some things that you can summarize for the benefit of other aspiring startups that are obviously looking for help, for resources, and sort of showing them how to grow their own businesses as well?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the big keys there is probably awareness. So being aware of what's happening, around you in your personal life and your business life, in pretty much every aspect of your life, because there's so many opportunities that tend to present themselves to us, and we don't even notice. And I think that's a big issue, is that there's some pretty big things, some big changes that could happen for us if we were just paying a little bit more attention. And so a big theme over the last 2 years has just been, realizing when something comes up that could be an extraordinary opportunity. One of the greatest examples of that for me was, when I first got the business off the ground, I own a video production company. I had gone to one of my first networking events, could barely say what I did. I just said, I've got a camera and I shoot videos. And one of the guys in the room had mentioned he was a graphic designer. And being in the media industry, there's definitely a lot of overlap. We certainly use graphics and video all the time. And he had come up to me after the networking event, hey, I do work with the NFL. The NFL and AAA, the big car insurance company, they're clients of mine. And, we're considering going into animation. So right now, I just make some graphics that go up on the screens inside the stadium, but we'd really love to do animation. And he says, do you do that? And in my head, I'm thinking, well, I've got a very bare bones knowledge of it. I've done a couple of small things here and there, but nothing ever that I would, put out from a professional level of having a business. But I also remembered in my head, I'm very well connected. I probably know people that could do this. And I just said yes. And he said, okay, great. Here's my card. Let me get yours. I'll probably be reaching out to you in a month or two. And sure enough, 2 months later, he reaches out and says, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Philadelphia Flyers called, and, we'd like to do an animation with them. Could you get us a quote? And here we go again. I'm like, I don't do animation. I have no idea, but I was recognizing that, this is a really big opportunity to not only get something in my portfolio, but to also learn how to outsource and build out a team. And ultimately, was able to outsource to an animator who became part of my team and did that kind of work for me for quite a while after that. And that allowed us to, really get our name on the board, to have the NFL and to be working with AAA on a big project like that. So I think the big key there is just recognizing an opportunity, and not necessarily faking it till you make it, but giving yourself a little bit more credit for what you're actually capable of. If I hadn't taken a step back and said, I probably know somebody who could pull this off, then I probably would have just said, no, it's not something that I do. And it probably wouldn't have led to more work with them, which ultimately got us inside of the Los Angeles Clippers and the Baltimore Ravens stadium. So I think just being aware, noticing where the little flags pop up, and giving yourself more credit, it really can go a long way.
There's so many key takeaways there in terms of just being aware. Say yes, not for the sake of saying yes, because like you said, you don't want to fake it until you make it, but just knowing that you're probably capable of a lot more than you think, and there lies the opportunity. I know that in the past you've talked about some of the mistakes that entrepreneurs and startups can make, like not being aware, like not being aligned, like not getting their finances in order, but maybe some other common mistakes that you're seeing, whether they be students who are looking into starting up a business or entrepreneurs looking to sort of take it to the next level, or even things that are preventing them from that success. What are some other key things that you've seen, those common mistakes that people are making, and maybe how they can sort of start out so that they don't have to step into that briar patch, from the experiences that you've already had?
Yeah, so a big mistake I've actually been seeing pop up more and more recently has been ever since I started working with other videographers in the industry. So we built out a coaching program where I've been working with videographers from Canada to New York to Los Angeles. And, one of the biggest things I'm seeing is that one of them, for example, had never gone out to a networking event because he just said, I don't know how to network. And he just hadn't even tried it. And it literally took me putting stuff on the calendar for him and saying, here's what you're going to do. You're going to show up. You're going to talk to people, and when they ask what you do, you're going to explain it to them. That's it. And I think people fail to start because they get this analysis paralysis, and then they just don't even do it. And so I think that's number one is really, avoid that paralysis of starting and just dive right in. It doesn't mean, jump off the cliff and the parachute will just magically appear. But I think, that statement is true to a certain extent, right? Like, I'm certainly not going to jump off of a cliff and hope that something's going to save me. But I think that to some extent, it really means that you still have to take the leap. You still have to, start moving forward. Otherwise, you just won't go anywhere. So that's mistake number one. And then number two that I really see a lot is that people get stuck with this shiny object syndrome. So a lot of people think, especially videographers, they think if I can buy that more expensive camera, if I can get that nicer gear, it's going to land me more gigs, I'm going to get more work, and I'm going to get paid more. And the truth of the matter is you can have the nicest camera in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to be of any use to you. And to that same point, you could have all the gear you could possibly need, but if you're not doing anything to bring in any new clients, then, the business isn't going to run. So that's been number two is really just that shiny object, making sure that you're not blaming your business success on the tools that you're using, because it really does come down to your own smarts and what you're actually doing and how you're putting yourself into action. Those have really been the two biggest ones that I've seen, as of recently.
The two key words that I heard as you were speaking as I was listening up, and I hope everybody out there is also listening up because there was a lot of value bombs in what you were saying, Zephan. The first was you said show up, and I remember distinctly in our show 005 with Susan Matthews how she talked about her uncle Chris Matthews, who's on Hardball, MSNBC, and he talks about networking and showing up in his book. And you also talked about being resourceful, being, self-resourceful. And so on our podcast, we talk about, what are the different resources that are available to people. And so once you do have those resources, how can you effectively and efficiently use them and be resourceful, for yourself? And I think those are the two main takeaways that I've gotten from what you're indicating. Can you give us some of the essential understandings that entrepreneurs or students need to have? I remember one of the first things that you said when I asked you one of the first questions was having that proper mindset to deal with those daily challenges that people will face. And so how do you get into that proper framework to sort of have that proper mindset?
Yeah, so this lesson was actually taught to me the night that I had decided to quit my job working at the Apple Store. Essentially, it had been a rough day, and one of my freelance clients that I had been doing some work for was in the store and witnessed a pretty big argument. Some client came in, was really upset, caused a scene. But, he offered to take me out to dinner, and his big question was, how much are you making right now, and why can't you make that on your own? Like, why are you still here? And I said, I've never run a business before. I don't know how to do this. And I really have no idea how I would go about making the, $30-some thousand a year that I was making there. And, now that amount seems so minimal, but one of the biggest things he explained to me was he took out a little napkin and he drew almost like a little set of stairs, and it was 12 little steps. And at the top, he put 30,000. At the bottom, he put 0. And he said, all right, pull out your calculator on your phone for a second. Let's just assume that, you work 5 days a week. You get 2 weeks off a year, so you're working 50 weeks out of the year. That's 250 days, right? And, 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, the normal spiel. If you were to work that 250 days and you divide it by into the 30,000, and you do the math here. I'm actually bringing out my calculator here. So anyone can do this at home. 30,000 divided by 250, you get 120. And that means that all you have to make to replace a $30,000 a year income is $120 a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks out of the year. You still get a week off for vacation. You still get a week off for being sick. And that's it. And when he broke it down like that, he actually did it, based on the month. So that's why he drew 12 little steps. He said, okay, 30,000, if we just take this by 12, you only have to make 2,500 a month every month. And to me, I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to make that, so how am I going to make 2,500, a month? So he broke it down even further. But the whole idea was that, anytime there's this huge goal or obstacle that we don't really know how to solve yet, you kind of have to place ground zero at the bottom and place the big goal at the top and figure out what those 12 steps are in between. And, much like anybody else these days, if you go to search how to tie a bow tie, you typically don't go to Google. You go to YouTube and you watch a video on it. And so I think there's just so many resources out there. If you're trying to figure out how to do something, how to start a business, how to, do your taxes, how to find an accountant, you go to YouTube and you find a video on it. And is it going to give you all the answers? Not really, but you're going to fill in some of the steps along the way, and it's going to get you a good chunk of the way there. And ultimately, a year or two later, things start to add up, and you're now able to fill in those blanks and figure out what it takes to get from ground zero to that $30,000 mark.
We talk so much about some of your achievements. I mean, fairly impressive, being able to get the gig with the NFL to do the animation. Obviously, I'm right outside of Philadelphia, born and raised, and so the Eagles and the Flyers, and to be able to do that and to get experience, and obviously to publish your own book and have it be on Amazon, and obviously to do 150 episodes and have that in the iTunes store, and there's been a lot of success there. But in your own words, tell us about what you think are some of your key achievements.
I think probably a key achievement outside of everything has been not letting it go to your head too much. There's many people out there who can let that success go to their head. I don't want to point fingers, but I think Kanye West is a prime example of that in the music industry, of someone who can really let that attention get to them. And so I think, still being able to keep a level head, keep a calm mindset throughout everything. And I was even reminded of this last night. I went out to a cooking class with my mom. My birthday was last week, so that was a present to me. And we're sitting there just kind of talking about what everyone does for a living. And my mom starts to rattle off all the things that I've accomplished. And it's great that she's proud of me, but, I certainly don't just show up to dinner with strangers and just start, rattling off the list. I think, keeping that sort of genuine factor to yourself is huge. And I think that's really a big key accomplishment, is not necessarily the things that I've done, but still being able to make sure that, it doesn't go too far to your head. I would say that's number one. Number two, I think all of it as a whole, being able to create and develop those street smarts to figure these things out. I don't know many other 27-year-olds that have interviewed at this point. We've got, the 150 podcast episodes, but we also had 40 plus people on a virtual summit, like 42 or 43 people. So it's somewhere near 200 people from all over the world who've, created businesses, who have designed life the way that they want it to be. I just don't know many people that have accomplished that. So having, the smarts to figure out how to do this stuff, and having the patience to see it through, and actually see it, build into something. I think that's really key. Number two is patience is part of that, but also, just being able to give yourself enough credit to keep going.
Yeah, and what I would say to the listeners out there, especially as it relates to you, is stay tuned, because we don't know what's going to be next in terms of your story and how that's going to unfold. And what I mean by that is that we actually interviewed a terrific guy on our third show, Stephen Worley, on show 003, and he had actually done almost about 150 podcasts and did exactly what you did. And so when I saw that email where it indicated that you were going to end at 150 episodes, he kind of regrouped, he started doing a lot of writing, and he's actually going to start back up again his podcast. It's going to be different than the way it was before, but that was kind of like the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that, and I'm really excited about that because he's terrific, and I really enjoy listening to your podcast as well. So it'll certainly be interesting to see what comes down the pike as far as what you decide to do moving forward. But yes, you have achieved quite a bit, and you said you just turned 27, correct?
Mm-hmm. And a big thing I would add in there too is that we've actually got something pretty special coming in for episode 150. I don't want to give it all away, but if you've ever heard of The Last Lecture, it's an amazing speech that's on YouTube by a gentleman who was a lecturer, I think, at Carnegie Mellon. And the last lecture was essentially this professor had been diagnosed with some form of cancer or something that, he only had about 6 months to live. And, he designed the lecture that he would want to give if it were his last lecture. And his name is Randy Pausch.
I'm very familiar. Awesome book.
Yeah, so if that's any hint as to how we're designing the last episode, I'll just throw that out there, that it's not going to be like any other episode that I've done. And our last episode, 150, is certainly going to be a special one.
Where does this drive come from to be so successful, to make a difference in this world? I mean, I know right before you came on to the podcast, we had an opportunity to chat a little bit, and we talked a little bit about, your middle name and what that means, and sort of you coming into this world, and, maybe that has something to do with it, but, I'll let you kind of talk to us a little bit about where this drive comes from, and to be able to obviously inspire others to basically create their own, purpose in their own life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes from my childhood for sure. A big part of my pre-teenage years, actually, when I was about 10 or 11, I remember walking into the living room. My mom's watching TV. And she watched Oprah every afternoon like many other people did. But Oprah had some guy on who had created this organization called Free the Children. And basically, he was advocating, against child labor in third world countries, among many other things, and making sure that, children were fed and had schools and a safe place to go. And I remember my mom saying, look at this guy, look at what he's done. He builds all these schools in third world countries and raised all this money and built this organization. And me being my naive little 10 or 11-year-old self, I turned to my mom and I said, I could do that. And I don't really know why or where it came from. I remember very specifically saying like, oh, that's nothing. I could do that. And sure enough, we turned it around probably within like 3 or 4 months, and we started doing a penny war at my middle school, and we had raised enough money to build a school in Nicaragua. And that was really kind of the first time where I saw what I was capable of, I think. And I probably I kill this one because I talk about this all the time, but, the 4-minute mile was something that was never before possible until one person did it. And once everybody else saw that person making it possible, hundreds of people started beating that record. So I think it's one of those things where it's like once you start to see what you can make possible, both for yourself and what others have made possible, it's definitely much more within reach. So that's probably where things really started, was seeing what was possible for someone at such a young age with, seemingly small capability.
And I think that ties in with what you were saying before in terms of just having awareness and just knowing that not just a matter of just saying yes, but knowing that you could probably achieve and do a lot more than what you actually think that you can do. Our fast pitch, mitchellchadro.com/books for books, audio books, guest recommendations, and the books that I read to start up each day. Sponsors our Fast Pitch, my book club recommendations, back at mitchellchadro.com/books. To see more of my recommendations and recommendations of our guests, just go to mitchellchadro.com/books. It's your number one resource for book reviews and recommendations. You know, we always constantly are talking about resources for the startups, for the young entrepreneurs out there, for the business owner that want to kind of take it to the next level. And I know that we started talking about YouTube and YouTube videos, and I know that you do a lot of coaching with some of your clients, and I know that your podcasts inspire and they motivate. But what other types of resources are available to business leaders, to young entrepreneurs out there that you can maybe reference here that will help them sort of get on their way to basically get off the fence, take it to the next step, and know that you don't have to spend a whole lot, like you were saying about spending a lot of money on that camera, but it's more important learning how to use it. And then as you sort of build, then maybe you start to buy a little bit more expensive cameras.
Yeah, I think something that a lot of people don't know about is actually there's quite a few universities now. I think Yale is one of them, MIT is one of them, that are building out these online courses that you can take to learn things like entrepreneurship, like finance, like investing and things about the economy. And these courses are out there and they're totally available for you to take without having to apply to go to college there, without having to have the grades to get in. And so I think that's a big one. On top of that, there's just so many conferences now. You know, any topic you want to learn about. For me, when I first started with the podcasting stuff, I had heard about podcast movement just through someone else in the podcasting world. And they said, oh, you should totally go to this. And, you know, little did I know there were going to be 1,100 people there, and I would get called out by the keynote speaker, Pat Flynn, in front of everyone. But it certainly is a huge resource to be able to go to those conferences and connect with the people that are there, because, you know, these are all the people in your industry that are anybody. You know, the who's who are there. And so I think it's important to learn from those that have really paved the way and have found a lot of success in whatever it is you're looking to do. And on top of that, you know, a lot of networking and connecting with other people that just genuinely want to help you and see you succeed, you know, in a certain field.
Yeah, and I think that so there's a lot of resources out there. It doesn't have to cost a lot, and it's just a matter of being resourceful by implementing some of these things, by just going out and doing it. And I think that's also an important takeaway as well. You know, I know that we've talked about your 150th episode. I'm actually really excited about it, and I hope that everybody tunes in for it, because the last lecture is an awesome. Not only is it an awesome book, but Randy Posh was really quite a remarkable individual, and I certainly have enjoyed not only listening to the last lecture and reading his book, but learning a lot from him, and I'm sure everybody else will be influenced by it as well. But tell us about some other challenging moments that you've had as an owner, as an entrepreneur, and I think that might be helpful and instructional to other people out there.
Yeah, I think one of the challenging things as a business owner was actually firing my first client. Not my first one ever, but the first time I ever actually had to fire someone that was paying me. Like, I actually had to tell them to stop paying me. I didn't want to work with them anymore. And learning how to have those difficult conversations, because I think certain things are going to come up in your business that there's just no way you could have prepared for them. And in this case, it was just someone that was extremely complicated to work with. And it really got to a point where, you know, it wasn't worth my time to work with them. And at the same time, though, they certainly weren't a bad person. We were not able to connect, you know, in that business relationship. So I think that learning how to fire a client was a huge challenge, but also on top of that is learning how to have those really difficult discussions. And I had a little bit of practice of that because, people coming into the Apple store with broken phones all day, you certainly have to have some difficult conversations. But I don't think it's something that you can just learn from a book. I think, again, it's one of those things that you really just have to go out there and do it. And it's going to come along the way when you're probably least expecting it. But just being, open-minded, being able to listen. Something that they always taught us when we were working with people at the Apple store was they have their 3 A's. Basically, it's acknowledge, align, and assure. So acknowledge that they're upset, acknowledge that, they're going through something that might be annoying or tough or, whatever it is. Align with them, so kind of get on the same level as them in understanding, but also really explaining to them what's happening, why their phone is broken or why something isn't working properly. And then assurance, people ultimately just want to be assured that it's going to get fixed or that we're going to come up with some sort of a solution to their problem. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I carried with me from working for Apple that ultimately, came into my own business is those 3 A's.
I think that's terrific, and I think that those are really 3 key takeaways that people can also implement and use in their own businesses. A lot of times people don't want to start businesses because they're uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. They don't want to fail, or they're afraid that if things don't work out, what are other people going to think, or what are other people going to say? And I think sometimes by talking about things that you've also gone through, maybe a failure, but maybe something that you've failed about, but it's influenced you and it has shaped you into actually who you are today, can also be instructional and helpful to those out there that, are up on that fence and don't know what to do. Maybe by talking to us a little bit about your own failures, but what you've actually learned from them and how it's helped you.
Yeah, I think something that I had actually seen as a failure that really wasn't was when our first company was bought out and losing my job. And this was actually made really clear to me by Adam Kozlowski, goes by Smiley. He published a book called The Quarter Life Breakthrough, which actually was just picked up by Penguin and republished very, very recently. But I think he was kind of talking to me about how, you can get a job that you think is secure and do everything right, and do it by the book and still fail at it. It can still be pulled out from underneath of you, even if you did everything right. And so I think that was one of the biggest lessons for me was knowing that, you can still do everything right that you think is safe, that you think is going to protect you from all of those uncomfortable things, and it can still get pulled out from underneath of you. So really kind of accepting that, secure and safe, it really isn't secure and safe. Anything could happen, and it could be totally beyond your control. And really just understanding that is going to help you when it comes to going out and taking those bigger risks and getting, outside of that box and outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think that the real takeaway there is just knowing, to me there's a lot of wisdom in that, so that, sometimes it's only by kind of looking back and realizing that it was actually a blessing in disguise that you might have lost your position and that occurred. But of course, a lot of people won't necessarily look at it that at the moment that it's occurring. And I think, the wisdom is realizing, like you said, that not everything is secure and safe, and maybe there is an underlying blessing there. And I think that's a wonderful takeaway. In this next round, we actually call it our fast round. Whether you're starting a business, you're trying to generate those ideas, there's free premium resources actually at mitchellchadro.com. Sign up for the newsletter, subscribe. It's free. We provide you free premium resources. You could also go to mitchellchadro.com/Inc. to start your business, LLC, S Corporation, C Corporation, or even a nonprofit. So that's mitchellchadro.com/INC. If you could tell us some of the best business advice that you've actually ever received.
I think the best business advice I received was finding someone who had not only, made it possible for themselves, but had really, built up their own business and was running it the way in which I wanted to run mine. and then going and making them into your mentor or your coach or, your coffee friend or even just accountability partner. So, one of the biggest things I do is I have an accountability partner who happens to be my best friend, but we Skype probably every working day for at least 5 or 10 minutes just to check in, see what everybody's working on. If he has a question for me, if I have a question for him. So that was probably the best piece of advice, is finding those people and almost it's kind of like building your cast members, like I talk about in my book, is, you've got to have a director, you've got to have a writer, you've got to have an editor. And so really creating that cast of people that you want to surround yourself with so that, you can achieve the things that you want to achieve, and really looking for and keeping an eye out for those people that are doing it the way in which you want to do it too.
And I think if people keep that in mind, in their mind's eye, to kind of refocus and reframe what it is to kind of create a team, whether it be a team of people that are working inside your company or organization, or a team of advisors outside that you're relying on, that you're counting on for that type of feedback, for that type of advice. I think that's a great way of kind of reframing it in your mind, is looking at it as a cast, people like, re-scripting in a movie, as you talk about in your book. If you had a billboard and you could put anything on it, what would it be?
So there's actually a great image that I really can't even remember where I saw it so long ago. But it was probably on someone's blog or some article, and it said, "Hey, do you remember that thing that you said you were going to do, a long time ago, and you never went and did it? You should really go do it." I would put something along those lines on the billboard, because I think that was one of the biggest pieces of advice that I took for myself, where I had remembered so long ago that I wanted to travel. I wanted to go out to California, and I didn't really know why, and it didn't really matter. But I had waited so many years before I listened to that advice. And the day that I bought that plane ticket, a one-way ticket to California, and started my trip, that's where things really started to fall into place. And I can't believe it took so long for me to realize, the one thing that I always wanted to do, I really had to go and just do it.
Very cool. We've already talked about 2 books, and you can reiterate what those 2 are, but the next question is actually our Audible inspirational book, because it's sponsored by mitchellchatro.com/audible. Can you name a book that has helped you in either your business, your family, or life, that certainly would be a benefit to everybody else out there? And I know that we've already mentioned 2. You can reiterate those, but if something else comes to mind, that would also be helpful as well.
Yeah, so, without sounding too cliche, the 4-hour work week has been huge. I've always wanted to know, how to multiply myself essentially and be able to accomplish more work in less time. But if I had to give any one bigger book that I think made a bigger difference on me, it's called The Storytelling Animal: How Stories Make Us Human. And it's by a guy named Jonathan Gottschall. And it's just a fantastic book about, why we align with storytelling so much. And I think that, his first line on the back here, it says, "Humans live in landscapes of make-believe." We devour novels, films, and plays, yet the world of story has long remained an undiscovered country. And so I really like that he dives into, storytelling and why it makes us so human and why it makes us who we are.
I'll tell you what, we've mentioned so many awesome books on this particular show, so I'm really excited to have all the show notes and all the links back at the blog. Can you name an app that you use to either help you in business, family, or life that you can tell all of us about?
Yeah, so I love my calendar app. My calendar is my to-do. But outside of that, let's see, I'm looking at my phone right now just to kind of think it over. I love there's 3 apps that are kind of part of a series. It's called Beta Waves, Theta Waves, and Delta Waves. They're free apps for the iPhone, and they play certain sound waves that align with your brain activity depending on if you're trying to be creative, if you're trying to relax and fall asleep, or if you're in a deep sleep or looking to get into a deep sleep. So it's these free apps where you play a certain tone, it's a certain sine wave, for about 10 minutes, and you listen to it with your headphones in before you go to sleep or before you want to do something creative, and it helps get your brain into the right mindset.
No, that's terrific, and I'm after the show, I'm actually going to check those out as well because I'm into all of that as well. How about a quote or a mantra that you use to inspire or motivate others?
Ooh, that's a good one. When I was a kid, I was like a walking billboard for Nike. I never wore jeans until I was about 16 or 17. I always wore sweatpants and elastic bands. So I'd have to say just do it would be the mantra. And add to that, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Sure. No. I know that we've talked a little bit about you working for Apple and maybe some other things, but maybe a fun fact that others don't know about you that you can tell us a little bit about, get a little bit more in depth, but a fun fact that maybe others really don't know about you.
Man, I don't keep too many secrets, but I've got 7 younger brothers and 1 younger sister, and I'm still an only child.
I love it. Worst advice being given to young entrepreneurs today?
Worst advice, going back to school.
Yeah, how do you like that?
People who choose to go back to school to learn entrepreneurship is a mistake. I keep seeing all these like grad school programs and things that are popping up for entrepreneurship, and I don't believe that you can learn that in a school setting. I mean, you really have to learn that from just doing it and trial by fire. And I think it's a little bit similar in the marketing industry. I think people come out of school from a marketing degree, and it's just they're not teaching you what marketing is actually working in the industry, and people end up getting stuck in like a sales position. So going back to school is certainly the right thing for certain people, especially doctors and people who have certain specialties. But I think, if you're going back to school to learn entrepreneurship, it's probably a mistake.
Interesting. When you think of the word successful, what first name comes to your mind?
For a person?
Sure, it could be.
I think Elon Musk is probably one of the best ones to think about. So he was one of the founding partners in PayPal. When he left PayPal, took a ton of money with him and essentially went for broke and started up a bunch of companies, including Tesla and Solar City and I think SpaceX as well. And he just took such a huge risk by saying, okay, I became this huge multimillionaire, but why stop here? Let's go try to revolutionize a couple of different things, solar energy, electric cars, and how we get to space. And so I think he's just one of those people that just really shows success.
What kind of systems do you have in your life? I mean, maybe mention one or two, but some things that you implement on a daily basis that helps you, obviously helps you not only align and focus, but just to sort of be successful.
I think one big thing was putting myself into a co-working space. So instead of, a lot of entrepreneurs work from home. It's easy for them. All their stuff is already there. But it's just as easy to walk downstairs to the refrigerator and start eating. So putting myself into a co-working space in a creative spot where there's, 40, 50 other business owners who are all in that same sort of, startup phase or, a couple years outside of that startup phase. I think that was really one of the biggest things that I could have ever done for myself. It makes you more productive. It still gives you that feeling like you have coworkers, like you have people to go bounce ideas off of. It just allows for the creativity flow so much better.
Our last question here in this fast round, I had mentioned a few times already throughout the interview about that email that you had sent out about, your last episode is going to be 150, which comes out sometime in November. And at the end, you kind of alluded to the fact like, I really don't know what I'm going to be doing next. And I appreciate that on many different levels, but maybe take a stab at it, kind of go out on a limb for all of us because, we're interested to see what your journey is going to be going forward. So 2 years from now, what are you doing?
2 years from now, I'd certainly would expect my schedule to be much more flexible for traveling. This past summer, I traveled through a ton of different countries in Europe and really just kind of fell in love with having that flexibility to be away from work and still being able to, answer emails. I closed a really nice contract from my iPad, in a hotel in Paris over a couple of emails. And so having that freedom and that flexibility, I think, would definitely be there. And at the same time, I think being able to have an open schedule that allows me to do things like, cooking healthy meals for myself, being able to wake up and go to the gym, or, I'm a rower here in Baltimore, so I love getting out on the water and rowing. So really having that freedom and that flexibility to do those things. But, I think from the financial side of things and where, the money would be made, I'd really like to have a business where I get to work with people. It just, in a videography world, I work with clients, and a lot of the times once the gig is over, it's over. Some of them are recurring, but I don't get to really work with people on themselves, or their own businesses nearly as much as I do, or at least nearly as much as I would like to. So I think that's really going to be a big part of the future is working with others as opposed to just, from a business to a client relationship.
Our wrap-up round, mitchellchadro.com/photos for all your graphic design. As we wrap up here, I'm certainly how everybody can stay in contact with you. The show, I'm certainly going to ask you personally to summarize 3 key points. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, Zephan, and I really want to thank you so very much. I mean, you've achieved so much. You've done a lot. I know that the show is really going to motivate and inspire others, and I think it's going to really give them a lot of wisdom and things to think about because, like I said, in a short period of time, you've really achieved quite a bit, and I think that people really can certainly learn from your experiences that you've had to date. mitchellchadro.com/shopping, shop for all your shopping needs, and also mitchellchadro.com/books. I mean, I love books, and so do our guests. We talked about the last lecture with Randy Posh, and we mentioned some other key books that we're going to obviously have links back to as well. It's a free 30-day trial. You get 1 free download with your 30-day trial. So head on over there. Zephan, how can people stay in contact with you? Because we want to see how things unfold with you, and we certainly want to keep in touch. And we're really looking forward to that 150th episode that probably airs sometime in November.
Yeah, so one of the best ways to keep in touch with me is over social media. I'm always active on Facebook, always posting pictures of my adventures on Instagram. But if you head on over to yearofpurpose.com, you'll find the website with all the podcast episodes. You'll be able to tune in when episode 150 comes out. And, of course, there's a contact page over there.
That's wonderful. Now let's all listen up to Zephan as he summarizes the 3 main points. Zephan, what would you say are the 3 main takeaways from today's show?
Sure. So takeaway number 1 is, if you had that thing that you were thinking about doing for so long, and it was in the back of your head and maybe you dreamt about it or it kept coming up for you, I think it's certainly time to do that. And one of the best ways you can do that is write down your thoughts every day for about 30 days and then start circling the ones that continue to show up. And you'll probably find some things that, you had wanted to do for quite some time. I think number 2 is making yourself a resource and also becoming much more resourceful. So, taking advantage of all that free online education that's out there, using YouTube to your benefit when you're trying to learn something, but also becoming the resource yourself and putting information out there on places like YouTube so that other people can learn it too. Because chances are, if you have a question, other people have the same question too. And then I would say the third one is, I think that really just developing your awareness and keeping in mind that, any opportunity could present itself to you at any given point in time. And, if you're just in the right mindset to not only receive that, but to notice it, I think it's going to be a huge benefit to everyone.
Zephan, this has been really awesome. I've really had a blast. I've learned so much from you. I know others will as well. We're certainly going to keep in touch, and we just want to thank you so very much for coming on and talking to the listeners today. Wishing you all the best and hope to talk to you real soon.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.